another draft science video. Just got back from a run and a little bit allergic, so this might go a little poorly. So see what happens. Hot also. So anyway, so yes, I wasn't going to bother responding to the end of Hochleit's video here because it's just so stupid. But he's doing it here again in a new video. And I just like, I haven't even watched this hour-long thing yet. Just horrible. And then Pirro made a useless contribution to the conversation. Making comparisons to record players and such, and it's just really not the same thing. He just doesn't get the argument. He doesn't get that there's details here about if you're going to claim interference, then there has to be some consistency to your theory of interference. Your two-slit theory is that the individual photons interfere with some medium, field, thing, whatever, that is essentially themselves, a little ghost of themselves. This is a conversation about what happens when there's a group of photons. Anyway, so for clarification, I did get a comment where Flap Batter Jacker, whatever his name was, said something to the effect like, as an explanation for the 1/4 voltage thing, that I sort of like, in a sense, that the idea is that the higher the amplitude goes, it goes by some squared law in terms of the volume. So as the voltage goes up, it goes up quicker the higher the voltage. So it has some gain to it. Okay, that's reasonable enough. Kind of. It doesn't really explain, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. But anyway, it'll have to do until somebody comes up with a better explanation, better than Professor Lewin's suggestion, which is that has something to do with interference. That's what he said. If you understood interference, you'll know why it's 1/4. Suggesting something like I said before, in the traditional two-slit, the bar pattern, the central maxima is much brighter than the subsequent bars. And it's by like a rather huge percentage. So this would be like 5%. So this would be 2%. And this would be like 0.5%. So you can sort of understand it goes down pretty quickly. So let's just say, if that were true, let's just add it up. And let's say this is all the way down. We normally say that adds up to 3, plus 2 is 5, plus 5 is 10, and then it would be 20, so 10 on the other side. So we have a total of 20 and 80. So 80% of the light goes to the middle, and only 20% goes to the sides. Rough estimate. So I guess 80%, you have to think about that in terms of if you have two signals, you could do some kind of like 20. I'm just trying to think of how to turn that percentage number into a multiple. So would 80% of 100%, I mean, it's still, I mean, 8% isn't, I'm just trying to get a ratio, somehow to figure that out. So you could argue that if it was 20%, you're still, then you're with a 5. 5 is the wrong number. Or multiple. Well, anyway, maybe somebody can figure that out if that's what he's talking about. And again, my argument would be in the double slit or single slit experiments, traditionally kind of, I thought, understood that the light, the reason why the central maxima is so much brighter is because a lot of the light doesn't get interfered with at all. And that's why it goes through the slit and ends up in the middle. Because no matter how far away you go, it's still a little tiny slit. So it's always going to go just to the middle. But anyway, alright. So that's a subject. So we have the Professor Lewin thing as a subject. Then in the other experiment by MIT, we have the contrary evidence, which was when he blocked one of the receivers when they were at the point where there was no signal, where the two were interfering with each other. The signal was really loud when there was just one receiver, which is a little strange. And then even in the Professor Lewin example, when he moved it to these other positions, when there was constructive interference, the signal here was almost as loud as the central one. So it really couldn't be this central maxima argument, because this one was almost as loud as this one. So this can't be the explanation, logically. Now maybe that was his explanation, but I just mean it can't be the right answer for the scene phenomenon. It happened. So yeah, it has to be explained because it happened. I saw it. You did it. All right. So to Hafele Day. So there's another point I wanted to make. All right. So what the flapjacker got me thinking about was how this is really like kind of a push-pull scenario. Because there is a circuit in AM radios, because I think it's called the envelope circuit, something like that, and there's a diode, and it exists for one purpose, just to cut off all the negative signal, because the negative signal is just an exact copy of the positive signal. So when when the voltage comes in, it's coming in from the source, positive and negative. It's coming in as an AC current. So I just thought so let's just say this is just as a crude diagram of the antenna, in a sense that think of it as a string. Think of it as something under tension. Okay, and so there's a weight here on the bottom, a little 10-ton weight. But anyway, and so if you could sort of understand, if you threw something against the string would flex, and as it flexed, it would pull up on the weight. So the weight would go up. And then after it got hit, because of the weight, the string would go back the other way. And so then it would go down again. And so that's sort of, in my opinion, an illustration of what the circuit's doing. When photons hit the antenna, the first thing they do is they're hitting electrons, and they're moving electrons out of their position. And then when the electrons go back into their position, that creates another flow of force through the antenna. So there's the initial flow of the push, which goes down, let's say, and then when the electrons go back to their position, there's a flow that goes back. So that's creating the AC signal from the on-off photons. So as I pointed out before, clearly these photons are being released in 1 millisecond. I even said a billionth of a second, maybe. That's when they all shoot out. It's not over a period of time. It's all at once. Boom. They're all gone. They're all released. And so when this happens, this is happening very quickly. And the circuit can interpret that into something else. I mean, if all this stuff hits in this moment of time, and we know the wavelength is going to be this long, the point is the circuit can round this off if it wants to, but the weight of the signal could be all at this end. The very fact that there's a line going down this way could just be an illusion, in the sense that the real true alternating current could just be a positive signal, and then there's a negative signal. That would be going the opposite way. But that's all there'd be. And they'd be at a separated distance, separated by a distance. But where they are positioned here exactly in time doesn't really make any difference. It's sort of an illusion that we could know if it's happening in a billionth of a second. We're not going to be able to see that, even with an oscilloscope. Anyway, so we're not going to actually see it. We're going to see an interpretation of it, is my point. Clearly there's waves that have shapes, and where the energy's at one end of the wave, and it can have a shape and be kind of funky looking. You have sawtooth waves and triangle waves. And sorry, I figured that was going to happen. And that just has to do with where in the time the stuff hit. But there's only a brief amount of time that the door's open for the stuff to hit. It's the frequency, the wavelength. It can't happen outside of the wavelength. It can only happen inside the wavelength. So, you know, well, I'll play this. It's just stupid. And totally unnecessary. I mean, he's throwing in, like I need an extra something. I don't need an extra something. So, what did I want to illustrate here? Oh, so anyway, so yeah, so what the signal is created from the antenna is turned into a positive and negative signal, and somewhere in the circuit, this will just be cut off, and this becomes the gap I was talking about. This is the empty space. This is the signal. This is the empty space. This will be the next signal. This will be the next empty space. That defines the wavelength. When they cut this off, it becomes a zero. So it's on, zero, on, zero. I don't think that was that complicated.
Wave is a certain number of photons.
Right. So there's a certain number of photons at a time interval. So again, these photons happen, and then there's a space in time. So you have to just make sure you leave the space in time here. There's an interval of time. That's the bottom of this wave, is the interval of time. So the rebound is the interval of time, and that's going to be cut off by a diode later. That's just going to say, screw the negative signal, we want a zero here.
And it does require a timing mechanism. A timing mechanism that demands no explanation.
Well, that's what the oscillators do. So when you call it a resonator, it's an oscillator. Okay, so that's what the crystal does in the crystal radio, is to create an oscillating timing cycle. Whew.
Of how it works or could function. What is...
I have. So you can just keep saying crap that isn't true, but I mean, well, I have.
Let's allow that, you know, there'll be a gap, you know, a missing... So there's a kind of tactic to illustrate it.
Alright, well what, maybe I should go to Google and type in envelope circuit or something. Yeah. I had to figure out how to mount a hard drive on using Manjaro Linux. And actually, you know, it has two stupid install errors. Just totally useless nonsense. If they would have just written the install instructions better, then it wouldn't happen. And other than that, it's run perfect. I mean, it's just funny, you know, really stupid errors. I'm sorry, that's disgusting. Sniffles. What did I want to type in? Envelope. P-E-C-I-R. Envelope circuit. Okay, so here's some pictures with one on a transducer, envelope detector. Well, here's a good drawing of it. I see the diode right there, so that's the one we'll go with. All right, so see, this is the input. Well, this one's just cutting everything off. You know, well, I don't know exactly what it's doing, but clearly the diode's here. So the diode's just saying, I don't want all this stuff going down. Just get rid of that. Just keep the up signals. So, yeah, well, that's a good enough picture of it. So it's just, this is the diode. So that means it's a one-way switch. So it just says, let the positive through. I don't want this nonsense, the rebound stuff we just don't need. All right. Don't know if that proves my point, but it's close enough. I'm satisfied. It's close enough.
The sine wave is better illustrated like this, where
I mean, I don't want to, pull out the old drawings, but I drew it, so I don't need you to explain that. I drew that numerous times.
I don't know. Well, there in itself is a problem, because you can't have the width of each thing, each bar graph, the same, because
yes, you can. That's what the timing cycle's for. I explained in the video how there'd be a certain time that something can get through, and only things that are at that frequency will get through, and that's it. Nothing else can get trapped, but things that arrive at the right moment, exactly at the right moment. Well, including the side bands. I mean, they include a little bit of extra space in time because they can afford to. Obviously, the higher the frequency goes, the less side bands you can afford to have. But clearly, the stuff has to get in here within a little tiny window of time, at least no bigger than half the wavelength, of course. And that's when it lets it in, and then there's the rebound frequency, and that's it, the rebound signal.
Clearly, you can't say if this is if the width is 1 second or 1 picosecond. If this is 100 photons, you clearly changed it in Mendham's theory. If you then say this is 200 photons, twice the height, in the same 1 picosecond, you've kind of, in Mendham's theory, changed the frequency, which makes...
Why have you changed the frequency? You've changed the voltage. It's a voltage signal. It's converting the number of photons into a voltage. So if 200 photons hit, there'll be a voltage of, let's say, 20 volts, just for the sake of it. 20 millivolts. We'll just say 200 millivolts. Millivolts. Shit. Alright. If there's 500 photons, there's 500 millivolts. Millivolts. Anyway. So it's a height. The height is the voltage. The height is a representation of the voltage. You just make the height go up if there's more. More height. Holy crap. It doesn't get thicker. Nowhere in any of my diagrams did I make it get thicker. Ever.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense for you to keep straw-manning my arguments with this nonsense that I didn't suggest. There's all I need is this height. I don't need it to do anything else. All I need is a higher voltage to represent the volume of photons. The higher the voltage, the more photons that went through. Where do I need some other variable? I don't need any other variable.
So I guess Mendel would have to hypothesize varying times. Yeah? And that makes it even harder to simulate the sine wave.
So we just made this up, right? I didn't draw anything like that. I didn't suggest anything like that. I suggested there's a rigid amount of time. This is a rigid timed cycle. It can't be of a different frequency. It can't take longer. It can't take shorter. It's a rigid, doors open, doors closed. A rigid timed cycle. I didn't suggest anything else. This is just more lying.
But it gets worse, because how then does one count what in classical theory is the negative side of the sine wave?
Right, and I will argue that the negative side is synthetic. It's the rebound, it's the electrical rebound from the disturbance. It's the equal but opposite reaction to the photons hitting, and that's why it's cut off. Because first off, it'll have the flex of a rebound. It's not going to be as true as the original signal, because the rebound comes back once the signal stops, and it goes back in a true sine wave probably. There's nothing representing the original signal probably in the rebound's signal. So if it's 200 photons that hit, the rebound is going to be really a straight line, in the sense that it'll be a parabola. It'll just do that graduated velocity thing. Fast and then slow down. Fast, slow down. That's it. It'll be just that kind of curve.
In classical theory, this is easy because the actual almost like voltage of the electromagnetic radiation is reversed.
Well, just remember that in my theory, what I'm saying is the original photons hit, the rebound goes this way. The photon hit, the voltage goes up, the rebound voltage comes back. Then they're equal heights. They might not be the same shape, but they're equal heights. And then when they cut the bottom ones off, that becomes the gaps in this signal. So the bottom ones were here, here, that's where the bottom ones were. And they're going to get cut off by the envelope circuit.
And that is to say that electrons, when they encounter that reversal, where they were pushed one way, will now be pushed the other way because of that reversal. But in Mendham's theory, must suppose some sort of...
So again, it must suppose something. It doesn't matter what I say directly, so he doesn't quote me here. He doesn't take anything I actually said and demonstrates how it must mean this. Nothing. He just, for the sake of being an asshole, is just making shit up. So I can just make up shit about how, he made these squares because he likes things to have pointy edges when he shoves them up his ass. Because he loves to shove shit up his ass. Because that's his favorite thing to do. That's why he has to make them bigger and fatter. It's because his ass has been so overstimulated that now he has to shove bigger and bigger things into his fucking ass. I mean, I can make up stories. You fuck.
Ultimate ground level. And then in fact, what you have is, as I've said, some sort of varying thicknesses, counts of photons.
Again, retarded. Absolutely no reason. Varying heights, varying voltages. Not thicknesses, voltages. No other variable required.
Wherein, I run out of space, but to get fully the sine wave, you have to kind of have this going like...
Yeah, well, we're not doing the sine wave thing. We're doing the gigahertz signal, okay? And we don't know whether that's a sine wave or a pointy wave or a shark-toothed wave or what that wave actually looks like. But it doesn't have to be a sine wave, for sure.
This. And therefore the response of the electron is always to a positive impact. And like I said...
There's no this hitting the antenna. Okay, there's no photon of this hitting the antenna. The signal being carried doesn't hit the antenna. These individual signals hit the antenna with a voltage height that's interpreted from the signal.
There exists no theory of electronics on how electrons work and produce radio based on this kind of bullet idea.
Yeah, it says you. Okay, what theory do you have? They don't have a theory of how a magnet works. What's your theory? Why don't you explain their theory on how a magnet works? Why don't you explain their theory of how electrons repel electrons? Why don't you give me their theory? At least I have a theory. They don't have one.
There's no theory of electronics and circuitry on AM broadcast that has this timing allowance for allowing a set number of photons through.
It's not letting a set number of photons through. It's opening a door for a specific timed cycle. So by the oscillation of the resonator, it resonates at a frequency, and only when it's at the on-off points in that resonance is any voltage allowed to get through. So it blocks voltage until there's that switch in its the capacitor, and when that switch takes place, the charging and the discharging of the capacitor, and for that moment a new electrical current can get through, and that's it. So there's a gate open for a billionth of a second, and it just reads how many photons came through in that billionth of a second, and then it reads how many comes through in the next billionth of a second. It's at the right frequency, and so there's no signal unless there's stuff that regularly hits at exactly the same timing cycle as the resonator. Shit.
In a set time, which doesn't fit in Mendham's theory, so it must be on a variable time. So not only do you have to count the photons.
Well, again, there's no variable time. I never opened any door to any kind of variable time. I was very specific. It has to be an exact oscillator. I didn't say, oh no, it just oscillates at any frequency. It just floats all over the place. I didn't suggest that. I said exactly the opposite as the absolute fact. So you're just, again, lying.
His theory. You have to count, if you like, and time the variable time. These require electronic circuits.
Again, it doesn't require any circuit besides the fact that the antenna produces the voltage. That's the circuit, okay, as the antenna is creating the millivolt circuit, the voltage, because it's getting hit by a certain wattage of photons. It's being hit with energy. It translates the energy into a movement of electricity. All right? What circuit do I need for that?
And there's no existing theory of such mechanisms, and it's certainly not how AM waves, AM broadcasting is achieved.
Yeah, well, you didn't. Creating such a lie, a false argument here, doesn't make your argument look very good. If you're this desperate to sit there and pervert what I said into this nonsense, all right, well, you must have no argument to make. If you have to lie about what I said, isn't that just demonstrating how you have a weak argument? All right, so we'll go to his new video, because he's drawing the same damn picture. I can't believe he's doing this bullshit. I mean, nowhere. Again, nowhere. Look at this, the same damn drawing. Pathetic.
Right. I guess this video has to be about
How slow you talk.
The familiar, well-versed, often discussed concept of wave-particle duality. Okay?
Yeah, well, just get to the point where this isn't about wave-particle duality. This is about whether when there's a bunch of photons in a field, and moving somewhere, a bunch of them, are they tied together with any kind of tension? Are they communicating with each other? Are they now a new kind of thing called a wave? Or are the individual photons have the wave property? I made it pretty clear. That was the question. I mean, I guess I have to put the questions in writing. I have to make it so explicit, because I guess you can't pay enough attention. I give you 7 points to consider, and one of those points was, which is it? Do you agree that the individual photons have the wave property? Or do you think they have a different new kind of wave property as a group?
My Trumpisms. Right. First things first. Mendham, you need to quit crying about the titles, buddy, because you can't take the moral high ground here.
Yeah, I can. You just keep doing it, all right? I mean, it doesn't matter how many videos I make where I say, okay, I'm not going to react, I'm not going to react. And then you just keep doing this bullshit. I mean, you didn't do it this time. See, so I guess my complaining works.
It's not even worth or possible getting into who drew first blood. But, my titles are slides of you and your theory. That is, your theory principle, okay?
They're preposterously exaggerated slights, just like your false argument you just made. You just straw-man the motherfucker out of me. All right? So I'm just saying, that's all bad on you, asshole. I'm saying, fine, if you want to title a video, Draft Science Dead, I destroyed him here. I'm just saying, you're making these preposterous claims. You don't even, your evidence sucks. I'm just saying, for the own sake of having some sort of sense of somehow this is a rational argument we're having. Like I said, as soon as I have somebody to really argue with, I'm gonna run so fast from your nonsense, because it's just exaggerated bullshit. You can't sit there to save your own life. You can't sit there and be a little bit, show just a tiny bit of rational temperament. Not just a little bit. No, you just keep saying exaggerated claims that you can't back up with a single shred of evidence. What do you have to do? You have to lie about what I say to make your arguments.
I have my giggles. I make the title a little bit interesting.
Well, look, whatever you're doing, I'm just saying it makes you pathetic. All right? It makes you a pathetic, fucking retarded loser. Because you keep saying things, you keep posting videos that are crap, like the kitty video, okay? What, do you think that makes you look good? You think it makes you look good to put up an experimental video and say, here, take that, Ed Mendham, and it's exactly the same experiment? Take what? And then you post one with radar, with microwaves, that's a two-slit experiment, which we're not talking about the two-slit. There's no medium to cause the interference pattern. And you can't figure out how that's not applicable. Shit. You're fucking too stupid.
Mostly summarize what I think the salient point is, when I'm not having a little slight at you. But as for the childish...
I don't give a damn about the slight at me. Like I said, if it had some kind of hope of being anywhere near some sort of accurate slight. They're just so preposterous. Again, I'll just make up stories that are insanely stupid about you, jackass. Because it's just stupid. It's stupid for you to sit there and claim victory with, a glass of milk.
That's all it. At least I'm poking your theory, and not unlike, but like yourself, you're stuck in literally the school playground, calling, here we are.
Oh, like there's a difference, right? Like if you sit there and say, if I called your son an ugly, dumb fuck, okay, you wouldn't take that personally. Your son's your creation. If I say, oh, he's an immoral, morally vacuous, uneducated, poorly conditioned sack of shit, you wouldn't take that personally. Well, my theory is my child, asshole, and if you're going to sit there and take cheap shots at it, I'm going to get personal, motherfucker. And if you can't figure that out, then you're really, really dumb. As I've been proving over and over again. You're really dumb.
Draft Science versus batshit stupid ugly smelly. I mean, come on, and Hythlaw Scott.
Yeah, I'm just saying those were direct responses to your videos. Direct responses to your outrageous titles. Fuck, you're dumb. They're response videos. Unlike your video, I actually played some of your video. I'm actually quoting you, fuckhead. While you're sitting there and fucking strawmanning the motherfuck out of me. You cunt.
And where's the other one? Hythlaw lies. Yeah, without explaining any lies.
No, prove it. Prove I didn't. I'll play the video, okay? We'll find that one and I'll play it. I'm sure I pointed out exactly what you were lying about. Exactly.
Right, so that's enough said on that one. Oh, there is one thing. Look, you call me misrepresenting you and lying about you, say when...
Yeah, say when you don't pay any attention to my video, don't quote what I actually said, and draw a fake drawing of complete nonsense that you say is what my theory must imply, when it's not true.
I express the very sentiment in the words that you expressed. For example, you don't believe in electromagnetic waves. You said that. You said actually radio waves. But it's understood that you mean all of them. And I understand.
No, I never said that. That's just nonsense to say. I don't to sit there and pervert language that way, where you're talking about every kind of electromagnetic radiation as it's commonly described, and saying I don't believe in the concept. No, I believe in the concept. I don't believe in their cause.
You to mean you don't believe in the orthodoxy account of electrodynamic waves. And so if I echo them sentiments back to you, it's in that context.
Well, you didn't do any of the context. That's the whole point. You'd never apply the context. So all you're saying, all you were doing in that video, which was clear, was trying to imply that I have some extreme thing where I don't believe there's any of this radiation taking place, when clearly I believe the radiation is happening. I believe the radiation is a frequency. There's no element of fact that I'm denying. I'm just denying your definition of what a wave is.
And in that understanding that you don't believe the orthodox story, I've heard your account that light is quanta at frequency, and what this, on one level, this whole thing is about demonstrating that such a simplified, well, we'll come to it, but such a simplified attempt to reconcile the orthodox description of what is quantum wave-particle duality, such a simple, naive, that's brute, simplistic, whatever. But it is ultimately simple. You yourself...
Yeah, fuck you. You just said naive. There's nothing naive about it, asshole. It's really quite sophisticated. It has polarization. It explains magnetism. It explains the strong and weak nuclear force. Your theory's not doing that. You can't explain why an electron moves. I can. And you're going to sit there and call me the naive one. You're the one who believes in, preposterous dark matter contrivances to fix lensing images. And you're calling me naive. You're a adult. A sucker. Gullible. A gullible dimwit. Your gullible dimwit theory. How's that?
Describe it as quite a simple system.
Yeah, simple doesn't mean naive. Einstein's papers weren't 600 pages long, okay? I mean, his theory is kind of simple. It doesn't have any details in it. It doesn't have any mechanisms in it. Okay, he throws everything into some sort of vortex of who knows what to do all the work.
Meant as a slight.
Oh yeah, naive isn't meant as a slight. Fuck you.
I think I've made an account on a different subject of electron spin as a dynamic system, and I think if physicists looked at it, they would go, "Oh, how did we not see that?" Yeah, and perhaps somebody has.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen because your video was completely not tied together tight. No tightness whatsoever in where you were going at all. I mean, I think you were trying to say there's a precondition, and the precondition is deciding the output. But I can only guess that's what you were saying.
Perhaps, but it just not made it into mainstream fruition. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with simple, except that
assholes like you will say it's naive. Yeah, that's what's wrong with it.
Lots of high-level physicists would give an account to say, we've tried lots of simple stuff, so yeah, we'll hear it.
Yeah, we already know how naive and trivial and glancing their analyzing of these alternative theories was. We've seen the Feynman debunk of Lesage gravities, the raindrop analogy. That's as far as they went. Something as complex as inertia and velocity, and why something can have it and why something can't have it. And he just turned it all into raindrops.
And usually, like the Akeem fellow, we always forget his name, who I like at the moment.
Douchebag, yeah, the douchebag. The douchebags that you sit there and post videos by.
He's got a double-barreled name like Nadir Akeem or something, and that's completely wrong. It's not Akeem. Anyhow, the point being is that what he's saying is that usually, most particularly when lay people do it, but even when experienced physicists try new ideas and simplistic tweaks or wholesale simplistic rebuilding, that they've found that...
So again, this simplistic thing, it just doesn't have... It's a totally unnecessary jargon. All right, you don't need to say it that way because it's not... like I said, it's kind of sophisticated and it gets a little bit complicated when you get into the details. So it's not that simplistic. I mean, the photons have perpetual motion. The electrons don't. The atom can because it can store the forces between the electrons, so it can store the photons' perpetual motion in a sense. And that's not that simple, jackass. It's certainly simpler than duality and undefined fields of magnetism and electricity, which doesn't even make sense. Electricity is not a force. But these undisclosed, undescribed fields of the magic stuff. Well, yes, certainly it's better than the vacuous, empty bag of mystery regular science is pointing. So yes, because mine is an actual description of a mechanical system, yes, maybe that looks simple compared to magic bag.
Can immediately see that it's wrong and not going to work because it'll break some established conservation principle, or there'll just be direct experimental data in exact opposition to what that change might be profit.
Yeah, well, if it was all that simple, then this would be simple. But obviously, in my opinion, Einstein's theories haven't been proven at all. Not even close. There's still really open questions whether gravity can move a photon. It's a real open question. It's a real open question whether there's absolute or relative velocity. It's an open question. The evidence isn't glaringly obvious.
For example, this is the case with yourself. I'm feeling a little, we've been arguing, Pyro and myself, with yourself and others, for a decade, if we include Pyro as well, about this quantum business, and the experimental, and we've been arguing about interference in the context of the two-slit experiment, okay? Now, years on, you're proposing that there is no interference phenomena at all. That video, so-called correcting Professor Lewin.
Yeah, I'm pretty much saying that's right. Photons don't interfere with themselves. Matter, okay, interferes with photons. Electrons interfere with photons. So a photon goes in a straight line at the speed of light unless it hits a proton or an electron. That's it. There's no other thing that can happen. It has to hit a little bit of matter. It has to hit something that is charged and is in a tension created by that charge.
It was like a dope moment. We don't even have to talk about two slits now. We've gone deeper. because you're even refusing to believe in the wave nature as
well, I didn't believe in the wave nature when I was 12. So I'm just saying that I haven't believed long before I got to this particle theory. All right, I mean, in the sense that I never thought photons were doing this thing ever. I always thought of them in the Newtonian corpuscle kind of way. Not a wave. A little tiny quanta of energy moving the speed of light in a straight fucking line in 99.99% of cases. And in the only cases where it doesn't move in this straight line is where there's some sort of matter involved, like the corona of the sun, or the charge field created between two pieces of matter put very, very close to each other. Yeah, places where you're a high likelihood of finding electrons. So your whole wave theory is dependent on you saying it's just a coincidence that the photons always seem to move funny in places where there's a lot of electrons. What a surprise that the wavy thing only happens then.
Experimentally evidenced of the orthodoxy, and this has been shown by pointing two guns and going that are generating light waves, electromagnetic waves, and varying the distance and finding interference according to standard orthodoxy.
Where was that experiment ever done? So again, you just keep bringing up stuff that's never. What the hell is that? It hasn't been demonstrated. Two light guns, and you proved interference. Where was that experiment done?
Yeah. See, you've been having trouble recognizing my context. I shouldn't have to keep. See, if on a.
There's no context except your hypocrisy and your duplicity. You hold their theories to no burden of proof whatsoever. Because obviously, if you were at all honest about the lensing images, you'd concede that evidence sucks. Because there's just as much not existing evidence that should exist. All the things that should be happening that aren't happening is as glaring as any of their images. And every one of their images has glaring defects in it in terms of constructing any mathematics that could justify it.
A day previous, if I said we fire two guns and the light interferes, I can expect the pause button and you saying, no it doesn't, there's no such thing, blah 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 blah. And yet if I change that and say, according to standard orthodoxy, these experiments show this, then I suggest that I've fully laid out the context wherein you can't call me a liar, right? I'm just taking the position and giving the account of the standard orthodoxy.
Well, again, and you're giving their evidence some sort of legitimacy. You say somehow they have real evidence of something. Like again, people can keep bringing up this spooky action at a distance bullshit and the whole thing with the polarization. These are all their assumptions. And so their assumptions about what a polarizing filter does to light. And we're all supposed to say their assumptions are correct. No, there's some reasonable doubt about almost any of their assumptions.
The fact is, and this is much discussed, is that the standard orthodoxy is very philosophically problematic, right? And that's why
well, I don't even want to have a conversation about scientific philosophy. It's just no point in it. But let's all go into the idea of the stuff that doesn't even have any evidence for it at all, like Huygens, like Heisenberg, like the Copenhagen interpretation, like string theory. You can go through all the stuff that's just made up, complete made up infrastructure for which they can't find one single experimental truth. Dark matter. I mean, those things should be all automatically put in a class, a different class, and said, look, we'll talk about those as, when we're doing our fiction. But it's not in the nonfiction section. It's still in the fiction section.
Occasions I've endorsed and enthused about your attempts to try and reconcile this business.
Like I said, you do it in such a, like you just did this. What's the word he used? Go back, whatever, 10, 12 minutes. Naive. Yeah. You're naive if you think anything you said that was at all in any way giving credit had any value because you took such a huge dump on it in the very next sentence.
And I've suggested, ways that I think that it should be progressed. I think he was on the right lines with trying to build a computer simulation of it, because that is on the right lines of...
Yeah, and I'm still working on that, but the problem is doing it in 3 dimensions, including all the angles. It's preposterously complex because there's so many pieces. So it's kind of like doing the 10 gigahertz frequency thing in some kind of realistic way. I mean, how do you simulate 10 million?
Mr. Wolfram guy, Stephen Wolfram, in his New Kind of Science, where he uses pure digital algorithmic approaches in updates in cellular automata configurations to demonstrate alternate perspectives on so-called laws of physics. Right. So now the video, I suppose, can really begin.
So here's his previous
Here was the last screen that I finished on, which admittedly you said you're going to do a part 2, and perhaps this being the last screen you haven't got to it. But this is what I really think it gets down to. All right? We
yeah, so I don't understand how you could think that. I'm just saying there was absolutely no room in anything I said for this. Obviously destroys the frequency, especially as it's drawn anyway. I mean, obviously there's no frequency here anymore that could be detected. So I just don't understand why there was any necessity to make anything fatter when voltages are represented as taller. 1,000 photons tall, 100 photons short. What was so complicated about that?
For the purposes of where we are, to my mind, forget modulation, right? Because
yeah, in a sense we can, okay? I'll concede that part of the argument in the sense that the only way the modulation could be a tool is if the right and the left emitter had different tones on them. Then you'd have some hope of you getting some piece of a signal, which could be that would be the byproduct. So when they combined destructively, there would be the possibility that the 2 tones would be superimposed on each other, and that you'd hear a third new tone.
It's with the disagreements we have, and the points that I'm trying to explain to you and you trying to explain to me, require, because your drawings are too small and it's not full enough a description, to my mind, because I've raised questions in the previous slide which are unanswered. Yeah, the fact about how to simulate a sine wave.
Well, whatever, that's been answered, so I'm not even going to go there anymore. So we'll just assume. I'm not going to. The video's already 54 minutes long, so forget it. We won't go over it again. But you'll see this video and the last video, and well, this video anyway. And that dispenses with that. But again, I raised 7 points in my video, and there was no recognition of those 7 points here. The issue we're discussing is whether interference happens in space or whether interference happens at the receiver, in the circuit of the receiver. Alright, so you're arguing that this interference stuff happens in the space through which the signal is traveling. I'm arguing the interference only happens when the signal reaches the antenna, and that's when it gets screwed. Alright. I mean, that was one of the 7 points I raised. Till next time, and such.